Dee-dee, dee-dee, dee-dee. All right, welcome everybody to Permaculture Smackdown with myself, Josiah Wallingford, and my awesome co-host, Paul Wheaton. How you doing, Paul?
I am large.
Awesome. Yeah, as always. So today we had users send us some videos, and they were all about nuclear energy. We must talk about nukes. And so Paul and I are like, fine. Our users sent us stuff they want us to talk about. Let's talk about it. And so we watched these videos, and we have our own opinions from forever about nuclear power. And so we're going to talk all about that today. I do want to encourage you guys to either become a member of thrivethrough.com or a Patreon supporter of Paul Wheaton's. And then you get special access to our live chat, and you can send us like comments and questions during the live show and get in on that. So do
So
that.
I want to know whether Josh is a member of Perma Ethos Thrive Through, or if he's one of my supporters. Maybe Josh will say. Just curious, because of course he's on Perma Ethos. Okay, because the whole show is revolving around this stuff that he sent us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So what does it matter where he's from?
I was just curious.
Okay. uh, Josh
I
says
do think
Josh has lots of comments today, and we haven't even started. Do you think what? What do you
I
think?
I think that this is a topic that's not exactly permaculture, but it's kind of like, okay, so where do we go with permaculture? I mean, like as permies, as people who give a shit, what do we want to do here? And of course, the knee jerk reaction, the level one reaction is nuclear is crap, and so stay away from nuclear.
Yeah.
And it's like I kind of feel like the answer, as with nearly all things, is far richer than that. I think that nuclear is shit, but coal is worse, and also solar and wind are not all that great. They got their downsides. And then if you want to do micro hydro, I'd say the best out of all of these is going to be micro hydro. But full on hydro has got a lot of environmental disaster tied up into it that people don't know about.
Well, what becomes the major topic, I think, when we get into these broad-based energy solutions is population. And so we have a lot of people in cities, which I'm thankful for. Because if they weren't, then they'd be all over the place, and my acreage would be much smaller, and it just introduces a whole lot more problems, including a lot of environmental problems, a lot more building going on outside of the cities, things like that. So I actually like having people condensed into areas as long as I'm not being forced to be one of those people. And they did talk about this in the video a bit. I do want to show which video we're talking about. And so there were two videos. I'm just going to show the main one that I paid the most attention to. Actually, I'll show them both. All right. So the
I mean, if you
first,
put them on YouTube, isn't YouTube going to kind of lose their shit?
I'm not going to play them. I'm just going to show people
Like,
where
okay,
the link is and stuff. All right. So this one is called John Kutch Solar and Wind Incompetence at TX6. This was the hardest video for me to watch because I found it to be the most annoying and non-scientific. Um, the other one is a hey Josh, can you pull that? Can you send me the link to that real quick? I don't have it up. Is a TED talk that was given, which also it's like TED talks are awesome, but the problem I have with them often is that they're so short, and it's like there's a lot of data I want to go through, um, and want the presenter to go through, which would be nice, but they don't have enough time. So they have to present it all. Hopefully, in their presentation, they're giving a lot of data, and then you go in and read all the data to make sure that what they're saying is a bullshit and to find contradictory data, because that is often the problem, is that there's so much data out there that it's easy to find contradictory data, and then which sources are the right sources providing the correct data. That becomes very difficult. Who's funding the research for this data? Things like that. So here's the second video. This is the one that I found easiest to watch. Why I Changed My Mind About Nuclear Power by, I'm going to butcher this, Michael Schellenberger. And that was a TEDx in Berlin. So did you watch both the videos, Paul?
I watched them both twice.
Holy shit. Okay, well, you just take it from here then. I watched the TED Talk one once, and then I plowed through the other one, the first one I just showed, twice, painstakingly. So
Why was it painstakingly?
just that lady that they kept showing that was so fucking annoying.
Oh, yeah.
Every time a woman is screaming, like my brain shuts off.
Hey, what's this woman's like got the thing going, I'm doing a naked protest. And I kind of feel like if you're going to do a naked protest, you better fucking be naked.
Oh, no.
It's like,
I didn't
what?
want to see that, though. She was being,
well,
she was
that's
being
the
kind to
protest.
us.
If you don't like, in fact, I want to kick you in the nuts right now. And I kind of feel like I went to this this event several years ago, like 10 years ago. And it was it was in Seattle. It was the summer solstice parade. And in the beginning of the parade, before the parade officially starts, then they have like 500 people on bicycles that are buck naked. And it's unofficial, and it's been part of the parade for so many years or something. And the cool thing is the Seattle cops, when the naked people come down, the Seattle cops suddenly seem to be interested in things over here.
Well,
they're like policing the stuff over here now. Look, there's some stuff I should police. Until the naked bicyclists have all gone by, then they come back around to see if there's any crime going on the parade route. And so it's like, that's kind of cool. But I remember the one year I was there was a plump older woman who was doing it. She was doing it. And some guy next to me and his cool sunglasses and stuff is like, she shouldn't be out there, And my response to this dumb fuck is like, I think she's probably the most courageous person out there. And in fact, this woman just proved to me that she has 100 times more character than you. And so, because you're sitting here on the sidelines, you're not doing shit. So it's like, she's got courage. It probably may have taken her a fuck ton of courage to do that. I'm impressed. That woman is magnificent. And so you're saying like, oh, you don't want to see that or whatever. And I'm thinking, damn it, Josiah, stop shaming that woman. Shame her for being a fucking idiot, but don't shame her about being naked, which, by the way, she wasn't.
Okay, well, first of all, the video is focused on her. So that's a big difference that if there's 1,000 people riding around that I can divert my view from and pay attention to other naked people. I would be like, they're courageous, awesome. Next person that looks better. But if it's her that's right in front of my screen naked, basically I'm watching a porno where a woman is yelling at me. And no thanks.
Yeah, I have to confess that we saw enough of her as it was, not because of her being naked or whatever, but because it's like, what the fuck? Okay, before I forget, I just want to point out that this one woman was like saying, for years when people wanted to read or write or something at nighttime, they would use candles. That wasn't so bad. And I'm kind of like, bitch, go try it right now. Go try it. You're going to find that a candle is shit. It's really, not only does it produce very little light, but on top of that, there's two big problems. There's the smoke that's going up in the air. It's putting a bunch of smoke up into the air. So you're sucked. But worse than that is that you're sitting in a room and you are consuming oxygen. You are taking oxygen in and you're breathing carbon dioxide out. The room is ending up with less oxygen in it because you're in it. Now you just stuck this thing in there that is like sucking the oxygen out of the room at a crazy rate. And it's not like there's a wind blowing through your room replacing it all. No, it's like a 1-to-1 replacement thing. And so now it's like the air quality in the room is degrading fast.
And what's that doing to your mind? And are you writing shit to the public while you're doing this?
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. So I think that if you're gonna bitch, if you're gonna suggest that, first of all, I don't. And the other thing is like there's pollution from that light. There's pollution from that candle. Plus, there's an environmental footprint that comes with the fucking candle. And I remember there was that show, No Impact Man. And I'm sorry, if you're burning a candle, you're making an impact. And so they turned off the electricity to their apartment, and they started lighting the evenings with candles. And I'm kind of thinking like, that's so much worse. So here's what I want to say. Is it's like, okay, why don't you use like a 5-watt incandescent light bulb? It probably still puts out a lot more light than a single candle. And then just move the light really close to wherever you need it. You know, it's not that tough. Wherever it is that you need light, just bring the light closer and you'll be able to see it. Look, incandescent light. I'm such a fucking criminal. So
also, eyesight, it's terrible for your eyes. If you're reading by candlelight, it's hard on your eyes. It hurts.
it's flickery. It's very flickery.
And people, you know, when they were reading by candlelight, the majority of people, glasses were really expensive. So there's a lot of people that had these eye problems. Anyway, I'm just saying technology is a wonderful thing. I got no problem with electricity. Love it. It's how we get it. That's the big question.
Well,
How we get
all right. And they are making some really good points in these two shows. And for a while, I can't remember how long, like 6 months when I was like 20 years old, I worked for the Northwest Power Planning Council. And it's like they are desperately trying to figure out how to get all this power to people without it ending up freakishly expensive, while at the same time trying to find a path that like isn't bad for the environment. So like, you know what, before we totally get on this whole kick of like, oh, let's all do hydropower, you know, there's a fuck ton of problems with those dams. It's like, it doesn't matter how many fucking fish lighters you put in there, you are still destroying the environment.
Yeah. You're massively altering the environment too.
So
by blocking a bunch of water in one area and slowly releasing it, you are changing everything downstream and upstream from it.
And in a way, you're doing it for the better, because in a way, I mean, a lot of the stuff downstream would get flooded to fuck. I mean, it was a disaster. It was obliteration. And with the dams, then it's like now it's far more regulated. We're going to like, you know, when we know the spring rains are coming, so we're going to like lower the water behind the dam so that way we can buffer a bit and make it so that, you know, people are less likely to die downstream. But let's just be honest here. I mean, huge environmental disaster. Not only is there fuck tons of silt building up behind those dams, that's like, okay, now what are we going to do? You know, but you know, the fish, like the number of fish in like some of the rivers in the Pacific Northwest after 20 years, after 25 years,
runs.
The number of fish in the rivers and streams and creeks was reduced by a factor of 20.
Oh yeah.
There are 1/20th of the fish of what there used to be. So what a fucking mess. And so the problems are big, and there's not easy and simple solutions. In the meantime, now I've got a podcast, the only podcast I've ever recorded with Sepp Holzer. And the thing that he agreed to do a podcast with me, provided he could only talk about one topic. And that's that in his neighborhood, micro hydro is banned. You're not allowed to do it. So micro hydro is going to be like, you're going to drop an intake pipe in and take like what, 5% of the water. And then you're going to have some head, you're going to run the water out, and you're going to generate a little bit of electricity maybe for one farm.
Or you're going to do a wheel.
You know, there's other things you could do. Generally, they don't do the wheel. They're not very efficient, but sure, There's also things in rivers that you can like run into the river where it looks like a little paddle wheel that just like little paddle wheel boat that just sits out there, and it's like it generates electricity. It's like you could do that. There's all kinds of micro hydro things that you can do. And then what they want to do and what they were proposing for like everybody wants to do micro hydro. No, but a developer comes in and says, okay, here's what I want to do. I want to put in a big fucking dam right here. It'll destroy these 3 towns. They'll all go underwater, and I'll get rich. How about that? And the government's like, that's great.
Yeah.
Government's like, no, that's cool. That's cool. Yep. The locals are having to fight it. Like, you're going to put my house underwater? Seriously? I am not okay with that. I don't want to fucking move. Fuck you. No. And it's like, yeah, well, you're going to be really wet here.
But there is a reason why. So micro hydro is awesome for people that live like us, that live out in the country. But if you need to power a city, what do you do? I mean, how are we going to use micro hydro to power the city?
Okay, and that's kind of what these 2 talks are about. Like, what are we going to do to get a whole bunch? Because the other thing is like those power lines, you lose like 70 to 90% of your power
through the lines.
Just through the lines, just getting it there. Yeah. And so then that kind of seems to suggest like, okay, well, what can we do for power that's like closer into the city?
That's why I wish Tesla like didn't just go away. Like when he was creating power, the wireless power, that could have, if we could have expanded on the technology from the point when he did it. Anyway, we don't need.
I don't know. I think that may have had a lot of serious problems with it.
Possibly.
You know, but yeah.
But same with nuclear. It's like
nuclear? So. Did you say nuclear?
Nuclear. It's the same with that, where it's like, so nuclear.
Yeah, you did it again.
Nuclear power is something that we're trying to build it for massive scale stuff, so we can power like major cities with it. And then there's also the potential of having micro nuclear, where you're powering like a vehicle with it. Like it's stable enough, it's safe enough to drive a vehicle off nuclear power. It's a one-time energy source that goes in your vehicle and lasts 50 years. That's kind of the goal for nuclear in the long run. And then you can have one of these on your houses and maybe your apartment building, things like that. And so we'll never get there unless we, 1, allow a free market of nuclear power, and 2, allow nuclear power to happen. But what is the environmental effects that's going to have to get to that point? I think that's the huge question, is if we can get nuclear power to micro levels, is it worth it? Or is there better technology out there we could be investigating instead of nuclear that would work as well or close to as well? And what's it take on the environment to get that energy source?
So, all right, let's, I mean, a big part of what we just saw were people that were talking about, like, and it seems like they were all pretty much saying the same thing. Nuclear has a lot of problems. Coal has even more problems. Coal is like far, far dirtier than nuclear. And
they were going as far as saying wind and solar and hydro are worse.
And I think I don't think that they really addressed hydro. I think what I've just shared with you about hydro is probably 1,000 times more than what they shared about hydro in those videos. Yeah.
What they showed was the countries and like the percentages of power from hydro, and then compared to the rest, how much they're using it.
Right. I do think that there's a lot of, I mean, I think part of what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, like, look, when we try to solve our problems, let's bring out an even playing field and let's look at the real data, as opposed to like, a fuck ton of hype. They're saying it's hype around nuclear, and I'm worried and I'm skeptical about nuclear. Even the thorium stuff, which they didn't mention thorium in these videos, which I thought was interesting. So many people feel like thorium is the way of the future.
But it was like the #1 recommended next video on that TED Talk was the thorium video.
Okay. So, but I thought that they were bringing forth some really powerfully stuff that we already all know about solar and wind. And it's like, but we choose to not think about it. And it's like, but it's like, they're saying, you know what? When you're trying to make national policy or statewide policy and you're a decision maker, quit fucking around with bullshit and focus on this. Now, I can tell you that when I worked at the Northwest Power Planning Council, there was an enormous, like the thing that they all wanted more than anything else was conservation. If people would just fucking stop using so much power, they wouldn't have to fire up another fucking nuclear reactor. But they're like looking at this stuff going, okay, demands are going up. We can't seem to get them to stop fucking wasting power. So what are we going to do? Now, the thing is that if the government says, yeah, fuck you, you don't get so much power, then, free market comes in. People start, doing crazy ass shit.
If they allow the free market to come in. Yeah.
Basically, yeah. I mean, there is some very, very dangerous stuff. I mean, it's one thing to get nuclear power from the government. It's another thing to get nuclear power from Cletus's nuclear farm.
Right.
And it's like, and then he's going to compete with Buford's nuclear farm. What are you going to get from there? I mean, what are they doing with their waste? They're probably putting it in your backyard. Like literally, they dug a hole in your backyard.
Right.
And so, and you probably don't want it there. So I do think that there's some serious shit to figure out with the nuclear waste. At the same time, what I thought was really brilliant was how many people have died from nuclear waste as well as nuclear accidents and nuclear anything compared to the number of people that have died from all kinds of stuff related to coal plant yuckiness. Yeah. And it's like the number, we're talking about hundreds versus millions. And it's kind of like, okay, let's get that out there. And then the next thing is like solar, those solar panels, we know they only last 20 years. Then you got to buy new panels. And I think that another thing is that if somebody's going to be advocating solar power, I'd like them to at least have spent, I don't know, even a month with solar, like actually living off of, like their life is entirely dependent on their solar panels. Because suddenly it's like, you got to know a lot about solar. If you're on a solar setup, you got to know a lot about it. And it's like, all right, so this is a huge fucking topic.
Yep.
And I agree with the Northwest Power Planning Council from when I worked for them when I was 20 years old. The best thing is conservation. And it's like, why do people not reduce the amount of electricity that they use? And the answer is they got no fucking idea how to. And it's like, I don't know, this is a topic I'm super pissed about. It's like, most of this is going for heat. And why? And then I like what Ernie had to say. Ernie's whole position is like, they told me when I was young that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. Well, I made a fucking rocket mass heater and the world's ignoring it. Mm-hmm. And I think Ernie's got a fucking good point. And it's like, I'm so fucking pissed off. This is huge. This changes the game. This really makes a difference. And people can't be fucking bothered. And they take their twigs from their yard and they put it in the little green can and they ship it off. And it's like, that could heat your home through the winter. And instead you're like firing up your nuclear plants and your coal plants and causing your hydroelectric disasters to heat your home. I want you to be comfortable. I want you to live in luxury. I just don't want you to fuck everything up while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you also have, I mean, the issues you have with doing rocket mass heater on a massive scale is insurance, right? It's people the insurance detriment or worries on what the insurance or companies will.
What? There's not insurance for a fucking hydro plant. There's not insurance for a fucking nuclear power plant. These things
Sure
don't have
there.
insurance.
Yep.
So what you
Yeah.
need to do is to give these insurance companies a fucking kick in the nuts.
Right. And then, so this second thing is people want the convenience. They love the convenience of just turning a dial, and that's all they have to think about. Whereas instead of having to go and gather sticks and do those things. Now, of course, when we get to the discussion of conservation, the argument against conservation on a true open market is that if we do conservation, that means less people are using this technology, and it won't advance as quickly. And a lot of people think that by advancing the technology, the more we advance it and concentrate on advancing the technology, the sooner we can get to cleaner energies systems and things like that. So don't conserve, go out and buy and encourage these companies to come up with these solutions that are better and better. And I would say that would work if the market was a truly free open market, but it's not. A free market does not exist, hasn't existed since governments were invented. And so there's a lot to tackle there to try and get that to happen.
There's a free market right now for energy. You
Is
could
there?
unplug your house right now and set up a solar system.
Sure, but what are there lobbyists involved? Are there not stipends? What is it called? Where the government
Subsidies?
subsidies? Are there subsidies involved? If any of those two were involved in the process,
Oh,
it's not a
yeah,
free
they're all
market.
over the place. There's
Yeah.
tons of subsidies. There's
So it's
tons.
not free
But
market.
at the same time, you could ditch your grid stuff and you go on to solar right now. But,
Sure.
but okay, you know, I kind of feel like, and the other thing is we talked about electric cars. Now, in order for an electric car to go down the road, it's going to take a lot of juice. It's going to take a whole lot of power.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like, in fact, you might, if you're using your car a lot, it might use as much power as all the rest of what you're using in the house. So it's like, man, that's a lot of juice.
So where are you getting the power to charge that car? Right? That's the yeah.
And yeah, and
So you said nuclear waste from the power plant, and a lot of people would say, well, technically it's spent fuel, not nuclear waste, because you could be using that nuclear material, that spent fuel, to continue smaller projects in nuclear, which would be that's when we go to like contained small scale micro nuclear in vehicles, powering houses, where you have like a nuclear box on your house that and so the major power plants have their spent fuel. There's still plenty in there that could last 100 years in a vehicle. They just can't use it in their power plants because the power plant requires so much that that's just nothing to them. It's not enough to generate the power, but it is enough for a micro solution to generate the power. But we'll never get to the micro solution when we have so much government and so much apprehension against nuclear. People saying we don't want nuclear in every city. We don't want micro. We don't want people just going out and building nuclear shit like you were just talking about. We don't want Ford and we don't want Tesla and we don't want all these companies trying to build nuclear stuff because who knows what they'll blow up or what kind of waste they'll generate doing it.
I have a lot of concern about nuclear, and I have more concern about coal.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, okay, you know what? And this is part of what I should have said at the very beginning. What we're talking about now, I feel like I know a lot about this field, and I probably know more than the average person about this field. But this is not my area of expertise, and so I don't. And in fact, I rather than going and exploring this area of expertise, and then trying to be an expert in this space, I'm choosing a different path, and I think that my path kicks ass on their path. And my path is that I think I can get somebody to have a more luxuriant life and they've reduced their electrical use by 90%. And it's like, and the only thing stopping them is knowledge.
Yeah. But, and city, like, I love rocket mass heaters. I'm all about it. But when I start thinking about cities, how does rocket mass fit in with the city? Like an apartment, like a major apartment building, you have 1,000 people living in one building. How does rocket mass fit in with that? How do you see?
Yeah,
I suppose it's possible.
no, it's easy. It's easy.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it nauseates me that this is your greater design, but sure, that's fine. Rocket mass heaters would do well in a city.
You could have, I'm just thinking, when I think about that, I think about ways you could use, you could have rocket mass in each apartment dwelling, or you could have rocket mass in the whole build that heats the whole building, right? That could be a possibility, like they do with giant, what are they called? Not thermoses. the,
Boilers.
the boilers, like giant
Yeah.
boilers for a building.
So a lot of those buildings also, because they're occupied by human beings, then and they're so big around that it turns out that they actually have very small heating systems.
Yeah.
It's just because they're so big around and there's so, I mean, every person is a 100-watt heater. And so you get enough people in an office and it's so far across, and then you've got lights in there and you've got other things that are in there that are generating heat. And next thing you know, it's the middle of winter and your heater popped on, but it's a little tiny pissant heater. It really doesn't do very much.
Right.
And most of the winter, you don't need a heater at all. But what you do need is air conditioning in an office building like that. But, I kind of feel like it's kind of like why our PDC, our PDC here is called the Homesteaders PDC. I'm really kind of tired of talking about how do we do this in an urban environment? And
Well, it's something that we can't
why do I
affect,
want to
though.
do that?
Right.
What I want to do, and it's like, fine, I can make life in urban way better. And I'm kind of pissed about it. I'm kind of annoyed about it. And I kind of feel like really what I want to do, how can I look at a bunch of people that are living in an urban environment? How can I entice them to come out to a more rural environment? What can I provide for them to make rural look 10 times better than urban? And then at the same time, can I construct an environment where they love it so much that they don't feel like taking a trip to town? It was like, here you go. Here's a brand new Tesla just parked right here. You could get in and drive to town whenever you want, but they'd rather not. They'd rather stay here. And it's like, well, what's their job? Something online maybe, or maybe they're girting it and they don't fucking need a job anymore. And so I wish to create that scenario where it's like now the amount of energy being consumed off of the grid is practically zero by this same person. And you're saying, how do we get power to them in the city? And I'm kind of thinking like, how do I entice them out of the city and then not be on the grid anymore?
Here's why I feel that I'm saying that, because I do want people out in my community in the more rural areas that are smart to live in the rural areas, that aren't going to be using massive amounts of energy, because I think it's more detrimental to the environment to have a massive amount of people come out of the cities and into the rural areas. Like that can cause some major environmental disasters.
Right.
But keeping
There's a
them in
lot
the
of people.
city is good, unless I can educate them first, educate them on rocket mass, and then get them out.
Very good point. Very good point. There's a lot of people where it's like, oh, I'm going to live out in the country. I'm going to live 45 minutes away from my job. And then they're commuting 5 days a week.
So I'm going to need my Hummer. I'm going to need a giant building because I got to have my ranch. Shit, I got to put air conditioning in every room. I got to, like, all the, it's like, that's so much more detrimental than you working in your office building or whatever, like you were just talking about, where the energy factors are lower because there's so many people crammed into those small areas.
They're lower in the winter. Right. And then summertime rolls around, and now they've got this giant power sucking air conditioner to cool the building.
But you also have so many people packed in that they're not using vehicles very much. Like they are walking to places for work and to whatever. They're using the subway. They're using public transportation a lot more than vehicles. Like the
Not a
amount of people that,
universal. I mean, it depends on the city. I mean, I remember working in Seattle. I worked for Disney, and I remember my bus. I could get on a bus, and it would like be a straight shot to Disney. And I get off the bus like 1 block away. I'm like 1 block where I get on, 1 block where I get off. And the system, the bus system was a fucking mess. It's like I would go and wait at the bus stop and watch 3 buses full of people go by. They couldn't stop at my stop because the buses were already full.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, oh, there's a bus every 6 minutes, so you won't be waiting longer than 6 minutes. And it's like, that's bullshit.
yeah,
And it's like, so eventually it's like, and when you work as a professional and you say, my bus was late, that's why I'm late. It's like, you're fucking fired. We only want to hire professionals. And so it's like, nope, you got to have a fucking car. If you don't drive your car, you don't get paid the big bucks. And so it's like, fuck.
yep. Go spend 2 hours in traffic.
Well, that was another thing too, is like when I would go to work, I would usually go to work at 5 a.m. because then there's no traffic and I'm not wasting the fuel. But anyway, but yeah, the thing is like, right, you're right. Seattle, like almost any other city, it gets to be rush hour. It's just a
LA
big
is
old
the
parking lot.
worst. LA is the worst city, I think, for transportation. I would say California. And now, like people like Elon Musk are trying to do things to make it better. The innovators out there, like trying that can have
Yeah.
the money to do it, they're trying to make things better. Like let's stick them in tubes and fucking shoot them through the ground to places.
I know Josh told us before we started that he was putting on his iron codpiece. And he just said something about biomass is not a solution to carbon loads.
Right, so we're about halfway through the show right now, and I do want to do that now. I want to go to the Q&A and chat. So what do you got? What do you got from Josh?
Well, okay, so he's saying biomass is not a solution to carbon loads, and I now clang, clang, clang. All right, Josh, it's a good thing you put on that iron cod piece. Here's the thing: is that if you switch from electric heat to using a rocket mass heater, which burns wood, which is biomass, you reduce your carbon footprint as much as parking 7 cars. And then you're kind of thinking, but wait, trees, they're like carbon. That's like all carbon right there, almost, kind of, sort of, not really, but kind of. It's a lot of carbon there. And it's kind of like, oh, that's so true. It is. And yet, if you're going to heat your home with natural gas, so it's true. The carbon that comes from your trees and shrubs and whatever you're running through your rocket mass heater is all renewable. It's going to grow right back. But at the same time, and the stuff that's natural gas, that's not renewable. The stuff that's running, whatever your power plant is running, there's all kinds of problems there. But basically, it's oftentimes coal. And then you lose 90% of it trying to get to you. And so it's kind of like, but the bottom line is this: if I remember correctly, just these are vague numbers, that when it comes to carbon footprint, that natural gas is like, I believe, 60% less than electric. And I think that a conventional wood stove is something like 80% less than natural gas. And then, of course, a rocket mass heater is 90% less than a conventional wood stove. So, I mean, like, we're talking about dropping it down to just almost nothing relative to. And it's funny, this morning, they started the Peasant PDC this morning. And we all started at my house, and we're all visiting here and stuff. And somebody was asking about the rocket mass heater here. And I said, 2 winters ago, it was 0.60 cords of wood. And so one guy said he had experience with the wood stove, and it was 7 cords of wood every winter. And another guy said that he had a tiny house. It was like under 400 square feet. It was a tiny, tiny house. And they had a conventional wood stove in it. And they burned roughly a cord of wood each month. So we heated this house, which is much larger than a tiny house, with just a little over a half a cord of wood for the entire winter, whereas a conventional wood stove was inside of a tiny house, and that was a cord of wood per month. So,
holy shit.
yeah.
That's a lot.
Well, a lot of times people make these tiny houses and they don't exactly do a lot of insulation.
Yeah.
And those tiny little conventional wood stoves, they are like the least efficient. And they're the scariest, typically, because they get a lot of creosote buildup in those.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I want to do is I just want to say that it's like, and you know what? Can we get some big industry looking at rocket mass heaters and take this to the next generation? And here's the other thing is that during the appropriate technology course this year, everybody gets to make a shippable core. If you throw in an extra $200 for materials, you take it home. You take your shippable core home. And it's like, and there's all kinds of ways you can do it.
And Chris has made a fucking awesome rocket mass heater.
This is a ceramic fiber core. This is the best stuff.
Yeah.
Ceramic fiber core. So, so if we're looking at this stuff, I mean, I'm just nauseated by the crap I see. So I look at that one video, the one that made you cringe, and I kind of felt a lot like that guy that was in that, where it's like,
I'm fucking sick of hearing it.
I'm sick of placating. It's like he said, there was a time when I 15 years ago, I'm saying, okay, they should get equal airtime. That's only fair. And then he's saying like, look, I don't even want to do that anymore. The bullshit just keeps coming and coming and coming. And I kind of feel like, yeah, and I totally get that. And of course, naturally, I want everybody to live their life my way, which is a human thing. And I'm trying to mitigate that. Okay, look. Let me make a plan for you so you can have a more luxuriant life with more money in your pocket, and your like energy footprint is reduced 90%, maybe even 98%. And it's like, now that your energy footprint is so fucking small, can you live off of a couple of tiny solar panels and that's all you need? As opposed to like being on the grid, or as you're suggesting, a tiny little nuclear power plant. And I kind of feel like, what's better than a tiny nuclear power plant, or what's better than a solar panel, is micro hydro. That's way better. But that's illegal, fuckers. And it's like, fuck, what a fucking...
Well, you get enough people doing micro hydro, then you start fucking up those streams and things like that. That's the concern. I saw something cool that was a micro hydro plant, but it also mined gold. It had like magnets in it, and it would mine gold as well and it was like tiny bits of. It's like you wouldn't be able to see the gold, but the way it's like they use the electricity from the micro hydro to power this magnet that you could set at a specific level to capture those metal particulates.
How does a magnet have anything to do with gold? I mean, is it like gold is tied up in iron ore or something?
I don't know. It just collects it through the stream. So like they take out these two magnet things out of it, and it's like shitloads of gold dust are all on it. And they just scrape it off, and that's how they're collecting gold, which otherwise you would not be able to collect because it'd be like a shitload of panning to be able to get that micro stuff. It's like tiny, tiny stuff that's in apparently most streams. It's just in the streams. But you run into people saying the reason they're doing that, they do the gold permit because it's easier to get a permit to mine gold out of a stream than it is to get a permit to set up micro hydro.
Huh. That is awesome. I didn't know that. That does make sense, though.
Yeah.
And I would think that if I was going to try and do gold, I would just set up a small settling pond. I mean, the gold is so heavy, it will fall out really quickly.
This thing, it was like supposedly you could adjust it to whatever minerals you wanted to collect. And it would collect those plus any other minerals that had a weaker magnitude or whatever. But anyway. Okay, so let's it doesn't I don't know why I went off on that tangent. I just think
All
that
right.
was cool.
I think that if
Um,
we cut our overall use of power by 90%, then suddenly a lot of the big debates, I mean, if nothing else, like if we cut our power 90% and we left only nuclear power running, we'd still be using less nuclear power than what we're using today.
sure. But would nuclear power advance to a safer usage? Like would the technology advance with
That's
because
a
you reduce the
really good point.
consumption and then people are more comfortable with shitty energy solutions because there's less effect, but it's still shitty energy solutions.
So I like the idea. I mean, I kind of feel like you're right. The more solar power we buy, the more solar panels we buy, the more they improve the whole solar technology. We're going to get more watts per dollar as well as more watts per toxic GIC unit.
And using less shitty materials to build them, like finding alternative building materials, like carbon materials from renewable carbon to build these products instead of like lead.
And then there's also going to be the thing about the batteries. Like the batteries are going to get better and better and better. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of reasons to travel this path. But I thought both of these guys made a really good point, and that there's like, you know, granted there's a lot of hype around this technology, and by buying a lot of it, it's going to be improving it, which they didn't point out. But but basically, it's like when you've got to make energy decisions, it's not fair to go in there and say, stop buying coal, stop buying nuclear. You gotta only buy solar and wind. And I kind of feel like that's super unfair to these policymakers who are trying to sort everything out. And so you've got like a bunch of a little, negative press about nuclear, and it's appropriate negative press. Those problems are real.
Mhm.
Um, I like the part in that one guy where the TED Talk guy where he says a survey was done to ask how many people died in the Chernobyl accident. And most people were assuming thousands or tens of thousands, when in reality it was like, what was it, dozens?
1200. No, it was dozens from the direct exposure, but they moved a shitload of people around apparently.
You're thinking of Fukushima.
Thought it was Chernobyl.
So
Anyway,
Fukushima is like apparently nobody died directly, but what people did die of is when they pulled them out of a local hospital to move them to some other hospital.
right. Plus, you have
So
the ocean effect, like all the water that's going, through the ocean. Like, what's that doing to the reefs and the microbiology, things
I,
like that.
so you know, the critically important thing here is that nuclear power is the shitstorm that you believe it is. Although, I mean, that was also quite a while ago, but Fukushima was a more modern plant.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like there's room for improvement, to be sure. And it's a fucking shitstorm. But coal is 100 times worse.
Hmm.
And it's like the waste, the nuclear waste equivalent is being pumped into our atmosphere, which is why, like, if I want to go up into the wilderness of the Wallowa Mountains, where I spent some time growing up, the wilderness, no cars allowed, and I go up to like, I go to Catchatu Lake. There's not even a fucking trail to Catchatu Lake. And I go to Catchatu Lake and I pull a fish out of Catchatu Lake, which, by the way, didn't get there naturally. They
Yeah.
stocked it. But anyway, I pull a fish out of Catchatu Lake. It's loaded with mercury now, more mercury than when I was a kid, and it got there from coal power.
Hmm.
And so it's like that's a real problem. and it's true. People are having their lifespan, and I kind of like too that guy that was like talking about like, let's have a good metric here, and the metric he went with is like, how much is your lifespan shortened by doing cleanup at Fukushima versus how much is your lifetime shortened by being a smoker versus how much is your lifetime shortened by, and he had a list of things in there. And it turns out that, yeah, your lifespan is shortened by Fukushima. And you could even make the argument of like, nobody's lifetime should ever be shortened by something as stupid as electricity. And it's like, okay, that's a fair point. Well, but how much electricity do you use, motherfucker? And it's like, oh, more than average. And it's like, so then, where are you getting it from? Nuclear. And it's like, well, I didn't go to have a choice. I wanted it to be solar. It's like, if you want your choice to be solar, go out and fucking buy the solar, motherfucker. And it's like, because here's what you're going to learn. Right now, you don't think about electricity. You plug your shit in, you watch the fucking tube, and you don't think about it. You turn on the heat, you cook some food. It's like, you don't think about electricity. But then you've got a solar system, and now next thing you know is like every week you're going out there to fuck with it because it's like, oh man, it snowed. I got to go sweep the snow off the solar panels or else I don't get any electricity.
Or batteries died. Or, yeah, there's tons of... It's adding a lot of complexity to your life.
Little things, and suddenly you got to like know what the fuck you're doing. And it becomes a thing. And it's like, all right. And not only that, but they did make that point in the TEDx talk that the amount of toxicity per watt, and then the TED talk, his point was the amount of toxicity per watt for solar is 300 times greater than nuclear. And it's like, okay, I don't know how old that video was, maybe a couple of years old. And so solar's probably cleaned it up a little bit in that space, but I'll bet nuclear's cleaned up a little bit in that space too.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of feel like, when we're trying to figure this shit out, let's do apples to apples. I think that's an important metric to work in. Now, I didn't get the impression that guy was lying to us.
Right.
I thought that guy was pretty straight up. And I thought the other guy was real straight up too. But I kind of feel like, why isn't that part of the 4-color brochure for solar?
The one thing that was brought up that was really good on the solar was he was talking about how much room it takes to put these plants. Like a nuclear plant doesn't take a shitload of land space compared to solar, where it's like you can really fuck up an environment by blocking the sun to the ground below these massive amounts of, and that's because solar isn't efficient enough to, the more solar builds, the more efficient, the smaller the cells get that can hold energy, and so you reduce the footprint. But right now, it's pretty large footprint you got to put out there to power a city. And one thing that came from that was something cool that I had been thinking about for a long time, and it's because I read some article back in like 2010, and it's plants. There's universities are now looking at how can we harvest energy from trees and plants. Like we want to be able to plug into a tree and get power. And so what they've started doing is making, and this goes to like, they're making artificial leaves. That's what they're doing now. They're like, let's build what nature builds and make power from it. And so what that's going to do is, first of all, if you start making those in mass, just like solar, it's a shitload of materials you're going to have to get out of the ground to build these artificial leaves. So there's a huge detriment. But if they get it and the technology leads to, now we understand fully how it works and how we can harvest it from a living organism, from a tree, that could be potentially really good for us. Where you have energy companies planting trees to provide energy for a city. That
All
could be
right.
cool. Anyway, but it goes through the same thing of it's going to take like this is okay. So this is some article on technologyreview.com. The race to invent the artificial leaf. So you can see this leaf. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of metals to build, and there's going to have to be a lot of I thought they had another picture in here, but anyway, it's going to take a lot of horrible things to the environment to build this. But if it's successful and enough people pick it up and it advances, it could advance to a point where we're no longer using metals, we're just plugging into trees, or it's very little amount that needs to be done to a tree to gather the resources, the energy from it. Now what does that do to the tree? Are you going to have to GMO trees to get better energy and shit like that? But as long as the trees are acting like trees do, where they're pumping water into the atmosphere and they're cycling carbon in the air, that's all good things if it can be done. But it has that major detriment to the environment to get there, and that's where we're at with nuclear. That's where we're at with coal, and every energy source. I mean, not coal, solar.
All right. I like. I mean, right now, Elon Musk seems like a real good guy to me,
Mm-hmm.
and he's now pushing solar roofs,
Mm-hmm.
and of course battery stuff. And I'm kind of feeling like let's see what he does. Let's see what he comes up with, and it might be some great solutions in time, but a lot of this is like there's been a lot of talk over the last few years about new batteries, new solar technology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, much like this I just talked about. But like a lot of times you read the article and they leave out the downsides. So
Yeah.
like iron batteries, um, uh, can last 100 years or better. And whereas lead acid batteries, it's like usually you're replacing them in 5 years. And so it's like, well, let's all switch over to iron. And it's like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. It's like, yeah, they last like 100 years, but they don't hold nearly as much energy. And on top of that, they lose like 10% of their charge every day if you don't use it.
And how much more does it take to extract lead out of the environment than it does um, iron,
So
or vice versa?
I kind of feel like, all right, if we're going to sit down and we're going to try and really solve real problems, naturally all of my solutions are the best. And then we move on to the whole concept of like, all right, there's these people that live in cities for one reason or another, probably because there's some beautiful gal there and, and you want to hang out with her. And it's like, oh, okay, legit. So, uh, all right, so now you want some power. Well, of course, do all the things that I suggest to get your power footprint lower. But it's like, okay, there's a bunch of people there, including that gal that you're keen on, and all these other people. There's 1 million people in this city, and it's like, and so then, all right. And what are we going to do to get them power? Well, I think that the solution is first we get them to cut their footprint to less than half. Starting right off the bat. And it's like we're putting so much into all this stuff. And it's like, just telling people about conservation techniques is not that tough. And it's like, you know what? Tell you what, if you're an insurance company or a regulator or something and you're like, I don't know what the fuck a rocket mass heater is, so I'm just going to say no. How about if you take some of this money that you're giving freely to all this research and all these, how about just checking it out? Huh? A little checking it out. And then maybe you'll change your mind about them and start actually promoting them. Maybe you're going to say like, hell, we've got, there's like 8 different companies that make shippable cores now. And, we'll get them over and we'll set them up. And it's like earlier you were talking about convenience of like having a thermostat. And it's like, not a problem. You know what I do? I set my thermostat for 50. And if I ever get to a point where I'm just feeling too fucking lazy, I'll turn the thermostat up for a day.
Mm-hmm.
But here's another thing that goes on is it's like, I know I'm paying money for that shit. And it's like, but I got a fuck ton of sticks just sitting right there. And it takes like, I don't know, 2 minutes to start the fire. And it's cool. I mean, like, it's warm, but it's a neat thing that happens. To see a rocket mass heater do its magic is a neat thing.
Oh yeah.
And then it's like, and then the whole place is warm for days. And it's like, I mean, we're talking about so little to do here. And it saves, I mean, basically, when you compare it to like, you know, I don't know, heating your home for $1,000 over the winter, I mean, basically, you're kind of getting paid something like $40 an hour to heat your home. It's like, it's so much fucking money. It's worth it. It's totally worth it. And on top of that, I think I talked to you about this, I have ideas on things that you can do to make it so that your rocket mass heater is controlled by a thermostat. And it'll actually be even more efficient than what we have now. And not only that, but it's like the fuel for it is the garbage that you normally have hauled away. And it's like, I think that, you know, how awesome is that? But that's, now we're getting into a whole different topic. The topic is a good one, which is like, how do we get energy to all these schmucks that live in cities as well as out in the country? I mean, wasting of energy isn't exclusive to the city, but another ingredient that'll help if we take away a lot of those subsidies, I think that'll help an awful lot. Like suddenly if your electricity costs, I don't know, double or triple, like let's say it's like, okay, you get to have nuclear power, but now you got to really and truly clean up that nuclear mess that's left behind. And it's got to be first rate. Okay. And on top of that, for hydro, you got to get all that muck out behind those dams, you know, and really the fish, I mean, I think
we got to make it so salmon can live and travel as they used to. Right.
You got to do better than those fucking fish ladders. Those aren't cutting it. Because the other thing is that when the fish are going downstream and heading to the ocean, the salmon, they go through those blenders that are the hydropower. Mm-hmm. Now, some of them do a pretty good job of like the fish go through mostly unscathed, but it's like
depending on the size of the fish, and
it's having an impact. It is having an impact. So, plus, if you go to Seattle, go to the Ballard Locks, and you can just watch as the salmon are trying to go to the fish ladder, the seals are just right there. All these huge fucking giant fat seals are right there, and they're like, I'm going to totally eat that fish because like they got to go here to go upstream. They don't got any other choice. I'm just going to eat them.
You also have humans doing the same thing, especially natives. I hear about that with complaints in Washington where the non-natives, the people that live in Washington, are going to go fishing, or they want to go fishing, but they're only allowed a certain amount. They can only go fishing in certain places, and they're complaining that the natives don't have these regulations, so they're out there like giant nets, baby. We're scooping them all out.
But
they're at the ladder.
Those natives are getting hardly any fish, you know, and the fish that they do get are so loaded up with mercury. Who the fuck wants to eat that shit?
All right, we are out of time, but if you are one of our special peeps that are in on the live chat and everything, you get to stick around, and we're going to go through all your comments and questions because there's a shitload of them that we got to get through. So thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week. Paul, you got any last words?
I'm doing we got a tour this Sunday. We're going to do a full tour of Wheaton Labs this Sunday, and it sounds like it's going to be a pretty big crowd.
Awesome.
And so it's free for anybody who's ever been here before. For anybody who's not been here before, you just got to get past that gapper fee and you're in for life.
And permaculturedesigncourse.com, I think when you buy the PDC, you get the tour as well, right? Isn't that part of it?
Well, there's that tour video.
Right.
But I'm talking about on
But you're
Sunday.
talking a
We'll
live.
all stand in front of people and go, oh, look at that thing.
Yeah, and there's probably been a lot of changes since the tour video, possibly. Well, that
There
was a
are
year ago.
some.
Yeah,
There are some. Yeah.
yeah. So if you're in the area, go to the live one. It's a ton of fun. If you're not in the area, go to Permaculture Design Course and you can see it there. .com. Permaculturedesign-course.com, right? Okay. Or it's permaculture-design-course or pdcvids.com. That's an easier one.
There you go. Vids.com.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Ah.